So the messages that we get around relationships when we're at our young ages, when we're kids, from songs that we're bobbing to, okay, from media, from television, even from friends and family, absolutely could be the thing that's tripping us up right now in our relationships. Right. As soon as I hit play, y'all, something out of my eye. Y'all know this is a real life situation. So I'm just gonna work through it. Blank blank. So in this video, I want to talk about some of those messages that come up all the time after 9+ years of being a marriage coach, 15 years of being married, 17 years in a relationship. You start to see the patterns in the messages that come up that are tripping people up in their relationships. And so we're going to talk about that. And some of them may be very controversial. We're still going to talk about it because why wouldn't we? This is the place and the space to be able to do that. And the first one I'm going to share is really personal. And I don't think that it's one of the ones that I hear commonly, even though other people may have felt this way and have gotten this same messaging that I did. It's just not my favorite thing to share because it just makes me cringe when I hear it. But it was my reality and it was something that I had to be aware of. And so I'm going to start there. And when we talk about these messages, we'll talk about, yeah, why they're problematic, why they're probably tripping us up. And then let's look to the other side of how we can get on up, dust on off, and not be so tripped up by these messagings. Of what do we need to replace them with, essentially? What have I replaced them with? What has worked for me um, in my own marriage and in my own relationship? So here goes another thing with mine. This is a message that I got through observation. It was not something that was said directly to me, not something that I even heard in songs, but it's something that I pieced together from my own experience watching my father, and something that I might have pieced together from the underlying messages in a song, right? But not really, no, nobody said it to me. Okay. I'm sorry about this, y'all. My eyes. And that is, you can't hurt a man's feelings. Mm, you can't hurt a man's feelings. I know you're like, that's not true, Imani. I know, but a lot of the messaging that we get is not true. It's just what we've gleaned, what we've taken, what we start to believe. And I think it's pretty obvious why this is problematic in relationship and why it was something that I needed to be aware of, and that I wish that I had put the pieces together earlier. But for me, this came from, my dad is not a stoic person. Anybody who knows my dad, he's very personable, he's really relatable, he makes friends everywhere he goes. You can't go anywhere with him without him seeing somebody he knows. Like, he's that dude. And also, I did not see him emote a lot growing up. He was pretty even keel, he was pretty chill. And I don't think I ever saw him in growing up what my interpretation was of being hurt. And so somehow I carried with me that I couldn't hurt a man's feelings. But of course you can. We're all human beings. You can hurt other human beings. But let me get this, out in the open and straight. I felt like you could anger a man, you could annoy them, you could frustrate them, they might get upset with you. But the idea of feeling hurt and having hurt feelings, that wasn't something that I could do, which sounds so crazy. This is why I don't like saying this out loud, but it's the truth. Because as I hear it now going out my mouth, it's still really cringe. And like I said, it's clear why this would be problematic. And it was problematic for me because if I'm upset, I'm not necessarily filtering. Well, this is not me now, but in the early stages of my relationship, I'm not necessarily filtering everything out in the way I should. And I am surprised if there's a moment where it seems like you might be feeling hurt by something I did or something I said, where I shouldn't be surprised. It's amazing how messaging can suspend all rationality from your thought. and you don't even realize it's happening. It can be a very unconscious thing, and usually it is. And for me, it definitely was. But when I finally got aware of that was the case, and I heard it out loud that that's where I was, what I kind of believed somewhere inside, I was like, oh no, I know that's not true. This is a human being we're talking about. And maybe they don't express their hurt the way that you would express your hurt. It doesn't mean they're not hurting. This is along the time where I started to do emotional work, mirroring work, considering emotions, looking at emotions and being for men and me, for men, for women, and being like, okay, when we look at anger, they talk about anger being a secondary emotion. A lot of times underneath that, there's something else: shame, guilt, hurt, disappointment, uncertainty, fear. Why are you angry? What is really going on? And when you see hurt expressed as anger, you attach the your response to the anger without acknowledging that underneath that anger is something really real, and most likely hurt feelings or disappointment or fear or guilt, something real, something more vulnerable than anger will really allow you to express. But being aware of that messaging of like, I am not gonna really hurt their feelings, that I had somehow gathered from childhood, from society, from my observations, from me putting things together that made sense in my mind at the time, and not being conscious of it, but then in that moment being aware of it and being like, okay, this is what I need to, this is the space I need to work on. This is where I need to really do some work, and start to do that work. It all started to shift, right? I'm not so tripped up anymore. I share that one first because I'm like, let me be the first one, the sacrificial lamb. Let me be the first one to come out and say, like, what I think was one of the most problematic beliefs that I held from something that I gathered that could really derail things in my relationship, that I had to get aware of and then get right on it. So yeah, that's the first one. That's a very personal one for me. The second one is a universal one. Okay, it is universal and might be a little controversial because whenever I see those interviews with couples who've been married for 50, 60 years, and they're like, what's your secret? And there's a few of those kind of things up in here in my list. But what's your secret? They're like, you never go to bed angry. And some of you who follow me for a while, maybe on Instagram, or if you've worked with me before, this has come up more than once. And I'm like, well, what if it's okay to go to bed and you're still upset? To go to bed without resolution, to go to bed and not have fixed everything. Is that cringe? Does that feel a little cringe? Or does it feel like relief? Like, oh, I can? I didn't realize I can. And hearing it out loud, again, we realize that messaging kind of suspends our sense of rational thought sometimes. And I was I was skeptical about the never go to bed angry for a while because I was like, hold up, what if I'm sleepy? Like sometimes what you have to sleep on it. What makes it problematic is if you think of scenarios where it's late in the night, you're both exhausted, you're both tired, but you're having a disagreement, you're having a spat, and you like, we got to push through because we can't go to bed angry, but your eyes are glazed over, they're red. That means your emotions are heightened. That means you're not able to think rationally. That means you're less likely not to be defensive. You're more likely to blame. You're less likely to be able to really hear the other person. Like all the things that you want to do in a healthy disagreement, you're not able to do. Sometimes you need to go to bed. Sometimes you have to sleep on it and just get some rest if you can and wake up the next day, ideally with just some clarity or at least some rest where you can be able to approach it with more intention. So, yeah, sometimes you're going to go to bed. Sometimes it's not going to be wrapped up in a neat bow. Maybe you got somewhere with it, but you don't feel quite like it's quite there, but you're tired. You go to bed. Sometimes it's going so left that and the emotions are so high that we're bordering on disrespect. We're bordering on going a place that is going to be really hard for you to retract from, right? Go to bed. So I do think this messaging that healthy marriages that last 50, 60 plus years, they never went to bed angry. I know plenty of couples have been married for 40, 50, 40 plus, years, bordering on 50, and they will tell you there were times when they went to bed angry. They will tell you there were times where they didn't even go to bed together. Okay? So like that is problematic. So if we're holding on to it, I think that's the problematic part. If you're like, by any means necessary, we have to resolve this before we go to bed. It might be more comfortable if you did. Maybe you'd have a more restful sleep. Maybe you would not be crying in your sleep, or it might take you less time to go to sleep if you were able to, everything was to wrap up neatly. Not if it can, that's great. But if it can't, pushing through is it's very unlikely that that's going to be the thing that's going to help the situation, right? So let's start tossing that message to the side, to the wayside, and just being present with what makes sense for us in the moment, right? So that's two. Never go to bed angry. The third one, I'm just hearing Mary J. Blige in my head. Like, you are my everything. Y'all know the song? My everything, right? Like, that song. And I always think of that song when I think about this message. That's the first one that comes to mind. But how many, especially where my elder millennials at, who know the whole albums of the 90s, any R&B love songs really push this idea that your partner is your everything. And without you, I'm nothing. It's like, and when you hear it out loud, you really start to be like, huh, I can kind of see where that might be an issue, where that might be problematic. But we got it a lot, especially my 90s kids listening to this R&B. We got it a lot that you are my everything. You're supposed to be my everything. I'm supposed to get everything from you. I'm nothing without you. I feel like, yeah, no. I think it's important for all of us to acknowledge how rich our lives are because of all the other elements and people that are in it, not just our spouses, not just our partners, our friends, our family members, organizations that we're a part of, communities that we're a part of. Even when you're like, I don't really have a whole lot of friends, you probably have one or two that means something to you. You have an organization that you're a part of that means something to you. You have even a co-working relationships, even if they don't make it out the workspace, right? These are your kick it when we're at work friends. That level, that community that you have there serving that purpose, or other communities that you're a part of that serve a purpose, ultimately they're important too. And sometimes with some of the stuff that you have, you go to a different place because they support you in a different way, and they understand in a different way. If I talk to my husband about perimenopause, he will listen. He will be sympathetic. He will be comforting. He will strive to be understanding. But if I talk to my girlfriend about perimenopause, she'll be like, yeah, girl, me too. I was like, what is this? Why am I so hot? Why am I forgetting everything? What is this headache? My left knee is cracking. My right ankle is swollen. Like, we can talk about it in a completely different way. We can talk about it in a way that shows that we have a shared experience, which is different than what I would get from my partner. So again, this is a messaging that you are my everything. It parenthetical, I'm nothing without you, right? Because that was a big part of the messaging, to put that aside. And that shows up in our relationships when we have expectations on our partners about, you should be the one to do this, and you should be the one to do that, and you are my only friend. And that kind of energy can be exhausting, it can be challenging. And so this is an invitation inviting us to think about how we can, again, move that you are my everything messaging away, right? If we're talking about this and sometimes you're like, yes, that's probably messaging that I'm feeling too, even though you didn't realize it. Okay, we're coming to it together in this conversation. We can put that messaging aside and start to look at a little bit more critically the expectations that we may be putting on our partner to be everything to us and for us, as opposed to really looking at the breadth of relationship that we have in our lives and being able to lean on multiple people, right? Again, even if it is a intimate handful, still, then they don't have to be everything, the end all be all, and neither do you, right? You don't have to carry that. And that doesn't mean, because I feel like when you say things, you don't want people to get it twisted. That doesn't mean that you can't be there for that person and support them, and you're like their biggest cheerleader and their biggest supporter, and you live together, you've built a life together, you maybe if you have children, you have children together that you're raising, like, yeah, that's your person. So sure, for sure. And they don't have to be everything. You see what I'm saying? And a lot of these I've seen folks take them very literally. So oh, and that really segues nicely into my next messaging. This also, I would say, controversial, especially when we look at it from a religious or spiritual aspect. So my disclaimer for this one is that the like I said in the last one, that taking it literally as opposed to looking at it as something that's more nuanced, but there are folk who take it very literally. So, and that is, we are one when we get married. When we get married, we are one. I get it. I get the sentiment behind that, that now you are in partnership. But over the years, I have seen this come up with expectation that you really are one, like one heart, one mind. Why don't you see this the way that I see it? Why don't you get it the way that I get it? We're not doing all the things together. You enjoy things and I don't enjoy. Like, I've seen it be very literal, and it kind of manifests in these ways that now that we're married, we are one. And it's like, are we? Are we? So just stay with me if you're raising an eyebrow right now for this one. You are two individuals. That's just a fact. You are one person, your spouse, your partner is another person. You have individual perspectives, you have individual joys and passions and things that fulfill you and light you up. You have individual experiences, right? You are individuals. Even what's the, it's not fraternal. Is it the other twins? I the moment identical even identical twins who look alike, who shared a womb, who on paper their DNA looks the same, they still are individuals. They even fight for their individuality because they literally look like they're one. People just put their names together, right? Like Tia Tamara, like, they just, you're you are fighting for that stake in the ground that says, I have my own mind and my own heart, and while I freely give and share heart with you, that doesn't make you one. And like I said, where it becomes problematic is in taking it very literally that you are like the same. And you might be like, nobody does that, but they do. I've seen it. And we have to differentiate one from the other. And we have to talk about the differences in our individuality, and that can be something that can be celebrated. I've talked here on this channel about the differences between my husband and I and how that has pushed me to grow, how that's taught me something, how that's allowed me to expand and learn, which I think that's the beautiful thing, right? And I look at it like this. There's an analogy about, I want to say it's like soup or stew. I could be wrong, but I know the other one's a salad. So when you put a whole bunch of ingredients in a salad, it's still a salad. It's got all the things: lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers, onions, olives, whatever you like in your salad, throw it in there. And then when you have like a soup, you put in all the ingredients in there, it's getting cooked up in there. You can't really fully separate everything from it. Whereas in a salad, you can. You still can tell, well, this is lettuce, this is a piece of cucumber. They maintain their individual integrity, and yet they're better together. Slap a little dressing on that. That's some good stuff. And our relationships are like that. And that's the analogy that sticks into my head, right? Because you have different passions. So, for example, Netflix a few weeks ago, I couldn't watch this because I think it would have made me dizzy just to watch it on TV. Netflix showed this live video, like live series of this man who was scaling the tallest building somewhere in the world. I forgot where he was in the world. Like no net, no safety, something. This building wasn't meant to be climbed like a mountain, but he was like, I will do it. And he was married. And his wife does not want to climb the tallest building in the world, but she supported him. She was there at the top when he finished. I don't know if she's always a little bit out of breath watching him do this. I was like, I can't watch it. I think it's going to give me an anxiety attack. So, but that's what like lights him up. She was like, that's what fulfills him. That's what lights him up. She was like, that's who he is. It's not who she is, but it's who he is. And in those differences, the beauty is that we get to support each other. So let's support our many passions and desires and learn from each other. So let's put that one aside too. Let's put that over here. This whole like we are one when we get married, we are one of one mind and one heart. Now, if you're taking that phrase with more nuance and more gray area and the layers that are in it around the consideration that you have when you're in a marriage and in a partnership for each other, the fact that you are building together, the fact that you're making decisions together, and sometimes that's not always so easy, but you want to be able to agree on these big life decisions or decisions that pertain to your kids and things like that. That is different, right? But if it's looking a little more literal, let's just put that to the side with the rest of them. Okay. Um, oh, this next one is not necessarily it's a message that we talk about a lot, that most people know. We say it a lot. Again, I feel like couples who've been married for 40, 50 years and they get that question, what's your secret? And they'll say this: communication is key. You got to communicate. And that's not so much wrong or problematic in the fact that it is incredibly vague, because everything is communication. My body language is communication. Like, and anything that you do is communication. Your silence is you're communicating, I don't want to talk to you right now. This is me not wanting to talk to you. Your sarcasm, your witty, like all of it is communication. Doesn't mean it's healthy communication. So healthy communication is key, right? But then at the end of the day, it comes to like, what does that even look like? I I was always hoping like, let's get to that. Because they were like, yeah, you gotta communicate. Communication is key. And they were throwing that never go to bed angry. And I'm like, what? Is that true? Ain't no way you got to 45 years. And you were, come on now. What about that time that one of you was on the couch and come on. But I'm not gonna act like I know your relationship. But in my head, I'm kind of like, really? Like, that's fascinating. So they put that together. What I would say and what I remind myself of is always what's actionable in that. Like, what's the how? Communicate how, right? Because in order for communication to really be the key to unlocking a healthy relationship and one that feels good, is do we know how to have disagreement without going off or shutting down? Do we know how to not play the blame game and the defense game Do we know how to listen without just quietly waiting for our turn to talk? We're not really listening, right? Do we know how to do these things so that we can build intimacy and connection? That's tangible. That's, to me, is real. So I think it's not so much wrong or, like I said, an issue. It's just so vague and so overused that I always wonder, do people really think about defining what healthy communication even looks like for them? What I talked about are just like some of the foundational ways that we want to be able to communicate and talk to our partners better and with more ease and less headache. What are you actually defining that as when it comes to healthy communication? So I was like, let's just put the vagueness. We don't have to, let's put the vagueness over here and then like lean into how do we actually define the healthy communication for our relationship. That's the goal because that's the action that you can take. That's the mindset that I have, definitely, because most times when I hear words around relationship and what kind of relationship we need to have, I'm like, what does that look like? If anybody's ever worked with me is watching this, probably like, yep, she says that a lot. Because we'll say, like, yeah, I just want to feel supported. And I'd be like, okay, what does that look like? Because if we don't know what it looks like in action, you can't articulate it, we can't say it, it's not gonna it's most likely not gonna happen. Because if you don't even really know and you can't articulate it, how is someone else gonna do it? And maybe they just have it in them and they do some things and that feels supportive. But if you're not feeling supported and you can't say what you want done differently or what that looks like in action, then that becomes more difficult to actually do and see happen. So yeah, that is one, and I'm hoping I can see this, child, because sometimes you write stuff down and you can't read your own handwriting. But this is so that was five. We have a few. We have them over here. So some messages. If you if you resonate with any of these, right, you don't have to number them, but just put a one in the chat, like just for me, and I'll know, like, okay, one in the comments section. I resonate. I have that messaging in my head. I'm gonna rethink that a little bit, and think about how that's affecting my relationship and how I can shift that. Just how nobody else when they pass by is gonna know what that means, but I'll know because you've gotten this far in the video. So this is my bonus one, and I definitely hear this verbatim in relationship a lot. And that is, I have to be strong for you. I have to be strong for my spouse, my partner, that I have to be strong. And in this scenario, it's like the one spouse is going through something and the other one feels like because there's fragility and vulnerability or sadness or pain or grief that their partner is dealing with, they have to be the strong ones. And I acknowledge that that can come from such a beautiful place and a place of wanting to be comforting, wanting to be helpful, wanting to be there, wanting to support. And also, some of that is ego. Some of that is, I need to be the strong one. I've always been the strong one. That's who I am. That identity that leans into, this is who I am, and I like the feeling of being the strong one, quote unquote strong, right? That word in and of itself has its layers. But it can be a combination of the caring and the ego. And I think we can see how that can be challenging one, even if it is coming from a pure place, because allowing yourself to feel and allowing your partner to be there for you in many scenarios actually helps to bring you closer. And being quote unquote strong does not mean that you don't have your moments, even if your spouse is going through certain moments. It can just mean that you have your moments and you can be there more for them. And It's discernment. Some situations just don't hit you the same as they hit your spouse. And you really can be the one to show up. You're not falling apart too. You're not upset by the situation or disturbed by it. But other times, if you are and you're just being silent and you're just suppressing, that can be its own challenge. And there's also discernment in time and place. Like, hey, you're breaking down right now. This might not be the time for me to share my thoughts on this or how I'm feeling on this. But when you're ready, I'm here for you and I'm open to sharing that too because you're not alone. Like something along that sentiment. I'll share briefly um, something that's a little heavier and something that's a little lighter around this. Um, when I had my I've had 3 miscarriages. So the second and the third, well, I'd say all of them, but in terms of my memory of this, in terms of what I'm sharing, my second and my third were hard on me emotionally. Um, it was just a real roller coaster for me. And one could argue that that's me going through a rough time. That's me going through the physical part of it, the hormonal part, the emotional part of it. And my husband was absolutely there to support me. And I checked in with him because while one could argue it's me, it's my thing that I'm going through, it also affects him. He's having feelings and thoughts about it too. And there was something to hearing that from him. I didn't feel like my feelings were being usurped or cast aside or dismissed. I more felt like, oh, I'm not alone in this. We can weather this storm together. You're feeling something about this too. Even if those feelings look different, if they manifest differently, there's a grieving that happens. We're both grieving and it looks different. And that's not, even besides that scenario and the other similar scenarios, we've had other moments in our lives where one has been in pain or one has been grieving or one has been hurting or going through a really tough time. And we've been there for each other. And somewhere in the midst of that, we've been able to, the other has been able to share if it's been challenging for them and in what ways have been challenging. Yes, with some discernment around the timing, but not with an intentional suppression either, if that, hopefully that makes sense. So, on a lighter example, this same thing, right? I'm going to swing the pendulum the other way. I work with a couple for whom the wife was a really good budgeter and really like stickler to the T. Like, this is how we deal with the money and the finances. That was even part of what she did as a business. And her husband, had made concerted effort to stay within the budget and sometimes would go off the budget and things, but she handled that kind of that the spreadsheets for that part of the finances. And she would go away for conferences, for work, for weekends and things like that. And he's holding it down in the household with all the things that need to get done and would go over the budget and then make adjustments and make shifts. And in talking to him, it was like, well, it was almost like she's on a pedestal. Like, that's her thing. That's what she does well. And I just, I don't do it like her and I can't do it like her. And I feel like she's going to be upset about, I want $50 over here. And I said, do you truly believe that there was never a point where she went over or she had similar situation? He was like, not that I know of. And then when we were able to get together, she was like, yeah, I've gone over budget. Just like flippantly saying it, like she was like, "It's Tuesday, girl," and he's looking like, "What?" And she was like, "Yeah, I've definitely, and it happens." And in that moment, I saw something shift that they were able to relate. That, you know what the shift was? This is what it was. It was relief. It was relief. Oh, you okay? You're human too. you you make mistakes too. Sometimes we don't even realize the pedestals that maybe we put other people on until they come down a peg and you're like, oh. So just to see that relief, sometimes not being the strong one, being able to share with your that you make the same mistakes and you're not alone in this. It is hurtful. I'm hurting too. Even if it looks different for the both of you, can be a relief. And hopefully we can kind of put that a little to the wayside, take that being strong for the other person with more of a grain of salt that allows for discernment, but not for suppression, and really be able to create connection in that way. So, yeah, those are my messagings. That's what I have. So, I'm sure there are more. If there are more, if there's something I missed, like, please let me know in the comments. I would actually love to hear that. There was a viral thing that went out lately. I follow a lot of parent coaches, conscious parent coaches. I partnered with parent coaches, and there was this whole thing around um, conscious parenting. When you're conscious parent your child and you ask them about certain phrases and messages and they don't know, they can't finish the sentence, like, you better stop crying before I, and the kid doesn't know. But then you realize, because of our trauma, we know before I give you something to cry about, like, there was that thing where you started to this was the messaging that I got. And so this list, I'm sure, is longer. If there's something that I missed, please put in the comments messaging that you got around relationships from parents, from friends, from media, that you later found was challenging and problematic and made things a little trippy, or just one that you remember that stuck with you, even if you're like, I don't even subscribe to that, but if this is one I got a lot, I would love to know in the comments, for real, for real. And I hope in general this was helpful in encouraging us to move away from, well, first recognize messaging that we've internalized, because once we're aware of it, then we can make certain shifts, and then other ways that we can think about it so that it does not affect us in the same way and affect our relationship in the same way. So hopefully this was helpful. So if you like this video and it was helpful, please give it a thumbs up, because that would be helpful for me as I am striving to grow personally and here on YouTube with all of you, and share my insights and my growth in real time with all of you. And so if you like that kind of thing, if you like that kind of conversation around how we can have deeper, more connected relationship with self and with our partners, and just more feel good relationship, period, because that is what we deserve, connection and relationship. If that is your vibe, please subscribe. And thank you so much for joining me, for listening, for getting this far. Thank yous only come for the people that get it this far, because other people that get this far, because other people don't get to the thank you. So thank you. I appreciate you for having this conversation with me, and I'll see you tomorrow.